Our second speaker is Michael Parsons, Bitcoin advisor and entrepreneur.
I'm a chartered accountant and ex-banker for my sins, and I'm here to present on anti-regulation, if you like, on Bitcoin. Let me first state I'm not against regulation per se. I think it should be done in a proper manner, and not in the way that some people think it should be done. Anyway, we don't need no regulation. Does anyone know Pink Floyd? So let me give you what I'm really going to be talking about here. Are you ready? We don't need no regulation. The other? Go! Hey! Leave our coins alone! So that's why I stand on Bitcoin regulation. Anyway, have we all calmed down now? I wanted just to point out, I won't go through this long slide, I think they're available as handouts after this meeting, just the difference between digitized money and digital money. In fact, money is the last thing to be actually made into digital. We've made print into digital, images in digital, other things, films are made into digital, but money, that which has already been digitized, has not yet been digital until Satoshi came along. What we mean by digital, basically, is that you're allowed to have the digits in your own wallet as opposed to in the bank as a third party. So just moving on, there's been a number of things on quasi-regulation. The FBI issued a report last year, as the previous speaker mentioned. The central bank of the European Central Bank issued a report. There's been some noises from the FCA, etc., etc. When you have regulation, what do you get? This is an example. You get this incredible nonsense of people paying anything from 18% to 38% just to transfer money overseas. So at the top here, South Koreans working in Japan pay 38.16% just to transfer money back to the homeland again. That isn't something I made up. That comes from the World Bank, and it's a chart produced by The Economist. So we don't need regulation. Why not? Well, when you go into a shop with a £50 note or a $100 bill, does the shopkeeper ask you to produce your passport and utility bill? The answer is no. So why should it be any different for digital cash? Why do you need to have all this regulation for digital cash? The spending of cash is not regulated. You can go and spend it as you wish. The government tries to control it, but they can't. And it's free to spend as we wish. And in fact, money is a moral and social right. We have the moral and social right to determine what we use as money, not the government. The government's there to serve us, not the other way around. As I said, regulation is for the benefit of the citizen, not the state. Regulation should not arise as a result of federal, I think there should be S's in there, but I've misspelt it. Just as I think the Bitcoin Foundation is trying to cozy up to the Federal Reserve in America and trying to get them to write some regulation. I think that regulation must be consensus driven by the Bitcoin community. Otherwise, we'll be consumed by the very system that we're designed to improve. What's regulation for? It's really designed, I think, to prevent cheating and allow fairness. But as you can see from here, Bitcoin is already regulated by mathematics. So there's no cheating. You can't double spend the coins. And there's fairness. There's no money printing or inflation. There's a fixed supply of Bitcoins. In fact, perversely, the one thing that should be regulated in fiat money, should be regulated, isn't. That is the supply of money. And the biggest counterfeiters of the dollar and the pound is the American government and the British government. Why? Because they print their own money. There's no control over it. With Bitcoin, it's controlled. So we don't need regulation. How can Bitcoin exist without regulation? Well, there are three potential ways forward which I've thought of with some help from one of my colleagues. The first one, which is there, you could just sell Bitcoins. If you just sell Bitcoins, like iTunes or digital magazines or films, then you're just selling a token, a product, not buying, just selling. So the word exchange doesn't come into it. And I think in the UK it would be possible to do just that. It is possible to do it in Africa, and one of my colleagues is looking at that as we speak just now. The second way is that if you were to sell bitcoins, as Jonathan mentioned, just for something else like Litecoins or other coins, that would work. But in fact, what about if you sold bitcoins for gold? What if I opened up a shop and said, I'll sell you bitcoins, but only if you give me gold coins or gold bars? There's no fiat money involved, no bank account involved. How you get the gold is up to you. That's another way possible. And the only way that could be shut down by any government is to shut down the entire gold for fiat currency market, which won't happen any time soon. The third way is to operate from a trusted international center for Bitcoin transactions. What that means, if somebody could convince a government to promote Bitcoin or adopt Bitcoin in the same way they're doing on gambling, for example, then that would provide a safe haven for Bitcoin with parliamentary approval. Now that is almost quasi-regulation, but that would be regulation with consensus from the Bitcoin community. And the third one is, I think, the best one. That would provide a safe haven for Bitcoin going forward. So what if all these three proposals were happening right now? Well, I've given a hint at that. What I'm saying is we need to spend more and more time being innovative and trying to bring Bitcoin to the masses in less and less time. I feel there's too much time being spent by lawyers, even me and others, trying to wrangle with regulation. And the whole thing is upside down. There's various government spokesmen saying this and saying that. But I asked one question today, as a previous person said, no single government has pronounced authoritatively on Bitcoin whether it's legal or illegal, or it's regulated or not. At the present time, it is not regulated. I'm going to give you a little parable now. Does anyone know, who knows what the word imaginal means? Has anyone ever heard of the word imaginal? All right. This is one of the few things that you all know about, but you don't know about. Has everyone heard of caterpillars? Yes? Who's not heard of caterpillars? No. Anyway, imaginal is a story of caterpillars. I'm using the caterpillar as a metaphor for a bank. And when a caterpillar is born, what does it do? It starts munching away at all the cabbages and getting fatter and fatter like bankers. And it becomes such a big, fat banker that it gets so full of all the money it's printing and everything else, it hangs itself upside down and forms what's it called? A chrysalis, yeah? Now, what happens next? Well, suddenly, out of nowhere, this is where Bitcoin comes in, little Bitcoin things come. We call them imaginal platelets or imaginal cells. This is a true story. Imaginal cells come out and try to attack the inside of the caterpillar. And the caterpillar's immune system, i.e. the bank and regulation, says, no, 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 no. And it kills all the little imaginal cells, one by one. What happens then is that the imaginal cells come more and more and more into the fore, and eventually they overcome and overwhelm the caterpillar. And the caterpillar, it turns into a big soup. So think of the imaginal cells like Bitcoin as a peer-to-peer. More and more people do Bitcoin, it will eventually overwhelm the system, and the regulators won't be able to cope. What happens next? Well, the imaginal cells feed and gorge themselves on the spoils of the greedy banker caterpillars, and eventually out comes a beautiful, unregulated butterfly, the Bitcoiner butterfly. And that's the metaphor I wanted to give you. Thank you very much.
So let's have some questions.
Hi. I think your first proposal about digital goods is quite interesting, but isn't it that the difference between digital goods and digital money is that one is used in exchange and the other is not, and therefore you would get regulated because Bitcoin isn't this digital good that we know?
I think what you're saying is true. What you're saying is that when you buy iTunes, you don't use iTunes as money, or you don't use other digital media as money, but Bitcoin is being used as a transfer of value, so that's correct. But I would say that you could use iTunes as money. I could trade iTunes if I wanted to, and we just choose to do it. In fact, in the non-digital world, when you go to Marks and Spencer's and you buy Marks and Spencer's vouchers, I know people that trade those. They can actually trade them for goods in Marks and Spencer's or trade them for cash. People will buy them off you. So it doesn't hold that you can't. That just because it's used as money, it should be regulated.
But
necessarily.
the difference between Marks and Spencer vouchers is
Yes.
that Marks and Spencers don't give you cash back for those vouchers, as in there is restrictions on the flow of money into that good. So I don't see how that's the case with Bitcoin.
Well, like with bitcoins, you can't go and get bitcoins for cash. It's entirely voluntary. If you sell your bitcoins, whether you get cash is a voluntary exercise. I mean, I've cashed Marks and Spencer's vouchers, but not with Marks and Spencer's, but with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi. In some contexts, cash is used to mean untaxed. Like
Cash is used to mean what?
Untaxed, like cash work or
Yes.
paying in cash. And that very often means that regulatory agencies and banks won't see that transaction, and it can enable bypassing tax laws. So if there's a distributed peer-to-peer currency where we're not tied to using any central banking authority or going through channels which are regulated, then in a world that embraces a peer-to-peer digital currency, how would people be forced to pay income tax?
Well, I was asked that question by a government spokesman in May this year at a presentation I gave. And the answer to that is you can only control Bitcoin at the exchange level. Outside the exchange, you can't control it. In the same way, when you've got money in the bank, it's controlled within the bank to bank, you can trace it. Once the money comes out of the bank as cash or as Bitcoins, you can't control it. However, the transaction is still and always will remain taxable. It's up to the individual to declare it. So I'm not saying you shouldn't declare it. You should declare all your income, whether it's on cash or Bitcoin.
Right, but it seems to me like if it was up to the individual always to declare their transactions, then a lot of people would declare a lot less transactions, because right now there are mechanisms in place to force them to declare transactions or detect if they're not declaring them.
Well, there's no mechanism in place to force you to detect cash transactions. Those are entirely anonymous, whereas Bitcoin is only pseudo-anonymous. So you could actually detect Bitcoin by looking at the blockchain.
No, I understand that, but I was talking about getting paid via a bank account, for example.
Yes. If you get paid by a bank account, then it's seen, isn't it? Yeah. But cash isn't. Neither is Bitcoin.
That's my point.
Yeah, but that isn't a reason to regulate it, because if you do that, why don't you regulate cash? So every time you go and spend more than £50, you've got to declare yourself with a passport and utility bill and sign a form in the shop. It would be, you couldn't do it.
Do we have another question?
Sean here. Just a quick question on what you consider regulation to the scope of regulation. Do we mean by regulation anti-money laundering, KYC regulation? Do we mean tax regulation? Do we mean what? What could we mean?
I think it means that Bitcoin has to be seen to provide with the existing laws. You don't really need any other laws. I mean, provided that if you have an exchange and it complies with AML and KYC, then that's sufficient. And the only reason that I would support regulation is that because the banks will not open an account with you unless you're complying with the KYC and AML. And the reason for that, even if you're complying with them per se, the banks will still not open an account with you because you're not complying with them under a regulation. And that means all the risk is with them, and they can be fined hundreds of millions of pounds for not complying with it. So in that instance, I would support regulation to make sure that the Bitcoin exchanges must comply under an authority with KYC and AML, and that would mean that the exchange would fly. And I've actually put that to the people in the UK government, as have others as well.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Good, Jim. Mark. Good, Jim. Let's go. Mark, there you go.